Happy May 6th. Not Cinco de Mayo, but...
Queso de Mayo?
Queso de Mayo.
I know better. I just don't care.
But as such, we're going to go ahead and drink margaritas.
Margaritas.
Because we had some margaritas left over from Cinco de Mayo, so it's the day after. We didn't have I didn't even drink any margarita.
Me neither.
Night. So there you go. We had margaritas available, but we did not have margaritas.
And not really good margaritas made from fresh lime or anything schmancy like that. Just good old sour mix and tequila.
The jug of mix, nothing fancy about it, just your run-of-the-mill margarita. I don't know if you can tell, but we might sound a little bit glum, and also we haven't figured it out at this point yet, but we're not going to use the same intro music, at least for this episode. I'm going to drink this run-of-the-mill margarita real quick so that margarita tastes adequate.
Tasted Applebee's-y.
Applebee's-y. I'll just dive into the deep end. My grandfather passed away about a week ago now. A week and 2 days now.
Yeah, it was last Wednesday.
Yeah.
April 26th, I think.
April
27th.
Yeah, April 27th. I mean, you say it's unexpected. He wasn't ill or anything, really, but, he's 89 years old, so...
He had his 89-year-old ailments.
Exactly. He had the being 89 years old, so he wasn't ill, but he was 89 years old. So it's like, yeah, it's going to happen, sooner rather than later, but it was at least semi-unexpected. I'm probably going to lose it during this episode, but, I'll carry on. So the way it all kind of started out the 26th, I guess, my grandparents both had a doctor's appointment. I brought them to their appointment. Pretty much since having COVID, I've kind of gone to their doctor's appointments and helped them out around the house and stuff. I took them to their doctor's appointment.
Just a regularly scheduled appointment.
Yeah, it was just like that. As a not that aged person, I get an annual doctor's appointment. Go once a year. Hopefully get a clean bill of health at the end of that. But my grandparents, they do it quarterly. So every 3 months they go see the doctor and he refills their medications and all those kind of things. And he'd done blood work and all this stuff, and the blood work didn't have some sort of big...
Alarming.
Didn't have any big anomaly. There was nothing big there. And everything seemed pretty normal. And, talked to the doctor, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was just kind of run-of-the-mill. I took notes and, what their blood pressure was and all that stuff. I mean, literally, I think the only thing that came out of it was that my grandmother needed to maybe take 2 a day on her blood pressure pills because the last 2 doctor's visits, her blood pressure had been high. Mm. So the only thing at all that had happened was my grandmother needed to change dosage on her blood pressure pill. Yeah. Other than that, everything was going to stay the same. I went after the appointment. It just so happened that this little homeschool group that Desmond's a part of, they go to park days on Tuesday, but that one kind of rotates through different parks. It just so happened that it was the park practically at the end of my grandparents' street. I didn't really mention it to my grandparents. I went there to the park after the appointment and, say, yeah, Des is here. And they're like, oh, that's good. So they were, like I said, my grandfather, there was nothing abnormal about his behavior or his demeanor, anything like that. So I was like, I'm going to go, say hi to Digna and whatnot. Digna had another appointment she was going to go to as well afterward. So when we got to the park, Desmond ended up getting in the car with us, and Papa kind of joked, and I think I rolled down the window and I was like woo woo or something like that, and Digna kind of danced a little bit, and Papa was like yeah, or like whatever he said, just being Papa, totally normal, nothing out of the ordinary. And so that would have been close to lunchtime, so we stayed there and we ate some lunch and all that kind of stuff. So this would have been like 2 o'clock or so by the time lunch was over and all those kind of things. And, once again, no different than any other of the hundreds of times we've done this kind of stuff before, Desmond had a very loose tooth. I remember Papa even asking me, like, does he have a loose tooth? And I was like, yeah, it's pretty loose and it needs to come out soon.
Like crazy snaggletooth.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, like he could tell just by looking at it that it was coming out soon. And it just so happened that it was coming out apparently at their house that day. So Desmond was eating chips or something and just kind of bit, and it kind of shifted that tooth. And he's like, oh, I feel it. And he's like, Dad, I felt it move my tooth. And I looked and I could see the little bit of blood on the tooth, And I gave him a paper towel. I was like, oh yeah, but it's ready. Like, go to the bathroom and pull that out. So he went over there and he got it out, to his credit, especially because we just had that episode about pulling teeth,
It's like pulling teeth.
But I think even it was so loose that even he couldn't not pull it at that point. Like,
we had tried pulling it the day before and it was not quite, I mean, it would have been forced out, but we didn't want to force it out. So we just let it be, but.
So he ends up pulling out his own tooth right there. And it just so happened, like, as Papa tended to do, was coming out of the other bathroom. He came out of the bathroom and he saw Des, saw the little, holding the paper towel. And I showed him the tooth and, all the good stuff. So that was kind of the summation of that particular visit was, look, and he's like, all right, Des, you're a big boy. And, all that kind of, encouraging things like,
things a great grandfather would say to his great grandson, and real supportive and sweet and just a normal day.
So it was probably about, 4:00 or so when we left, and, we waved by like normal, and that was the last time I saw him alive.
And he just passed in his sleep that night. We got kind of a whole succession of phone calls and Alexa calls and whatnot from his grandma about 11:30 the next morning. And unfortunately, she had woken to find him still in bed. And that's where he had been through the night. So as far as we know, he went peacefully and without pain. And but yeah, it was extremely unexpected and a complete shock. I mean, he was 89, but as much of a shock as that can be is what it was to everyone.
It kind of hit me pretty hard just because, as a teenager and things like that, I had the stepdad issues and, home life issues, that kind of stuff. And my grandparents were always kind of in my corner and always looking out for me, always looking for the best. So after I moved out of my mom's house, I moved in with my grandparents. And while I was living in their house, I finished high school and then I went on and went to college, and then I joined the Army after that. So, and during that time, they gave me a car. They gave me a truck, and I totaled that one. That was a fun day. But with the insurance money, then I got a car. I paid them back for the car. I will say that I did pay them back for the car, but they would do stuff for me and always kind of have my back. And if things, if I needed help with this or whatever the deal was, they were kind of always there for me. My grandfather probably might have been the day that Tuesday before he passed. I would go to their house and, anytime, Digna will tell you, anytime I was like, oh, I got to go over there and water the plants. Like, we knew that was going to be probably a 2-hour trip at least.
Oh,
yeah,
at least.
At least. So
it was the day was not gone, but basically
that was the day. That's what I was doing that day, was going to their house and talking.
It was usually a to-do list, and
I would do the honeydews and all this kind of stuff and just whatever, because they're 89 years old. He can't, do a lot of stuff. He had shoulder problems, so he couldn't do above his head. And I did it, and I loved him, and I'd do it again, But yeah, it was just one of those things. We talked, and everything was normal. I mean, we joked today, that Tuesday we, made jokes, and just, we always had a very good relationship. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship. Everyone has their spats in this, but we had a very good, very close relationship.
You had fried catfish plans, and what was the other meal that you guys were talking about?
Yeah, so we talked about it. It was probably that day, because I saw him the day before, so he could do his blood work. He did blood work on Monday, so I saw him on Monday, and then I saw him on Tuesday because they had their appointments. So it was either Monday or Tuesday. We talked about, I mean, he's been kind of had a little hankering for fried catfish. That's kind of one of his go-to favorite meals. And, he's like, we need a catfish house around here. That's what we need. Stop building all this restaurant and that restaurant. He's like,
catfish house is
like
a place
a catfish.
about 40 minutes from here.
Well, the catfish place is a place. I was just saying a catfish house. Yeah. So there's a place in Kissimmee or St. Cloud called the Catfish Place, and it's kind of it's been around forever, and they specialize in catfish. And he's like, we need a catfish house, something like that. And in Melbourne, I was like, mate, that'd be really cool, all that stuff. And then I was like, when the day he died on a Wednesday, and I saw him on Tuesday, but I was supposed to fly out to St. Louis to see our friends Tyler and Vanessa. It was their baby's first birthday, so we were going to go. Desmond and I were going to go there and see them very early. We were going to fly 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 in the morning or whatever on that Thursday, and he passed, so obviously that put a kibosh on that. But yeah, so I was like, when I get back from St. Louis, I'll get us some catfish. We'll have a good time, not because it was a birthday or there was nothing. It was just because,
Well, we had done the birthday a week before.
It was
91, and we had gotten him a big old milkshake.
Yeah, on his 89th birthday on the 19th of April, and then on the 27th of April, he passed. But like I said, you expect it because of their age, but you don't expect it because he wasn't infirmed. And, Digna and I kind of talked about this on reflection, talk about he died in his sleep. Lucky, that's the way I'd love to go. And obviously no one wants to be in pain when they're dying. So I get it. You don't want to have gangrene and 3rd-degree burns on your body or some horrible, painful way, obviously. But I think that based on this particular experience, when you see somebody who is pretty healthy, and then they're just gone. I mean, for them, yeah, they didn't feel pain, but the people that are behind, they're like, what? I didn't get to do this, and we were going to have catfish, And I even talked about, have you ever had a Philly cheesesteak? Because there's a place that opened up the street from us, and they sent a coupon. It was a 2-for-1 coupon on a cheesesteak. I was like, he might like a cheesesteak. Yeah, I think he'd be down with that. I was like, have you ever had a Philly cheesesteak? He's like, no, I've seen them on TV. He's like, you know what? We'll have those soon too. So
there were things to look forward to, even at 89, and
even if there's small things too. I wasn't like, hey, you ready to go bungee jumping? I realized the experiences of youth aren't necessarily the same for an 89-year-old man. So I was just hey,
you find joy in smaller things.
And, and part of the joy is, the company. So it was very rough. It's still rough. Very fresh. Trying to recover. And, they lived in that house since 1964. Mm-hmm. So that house is just synonymous with both of my grandparents, but obviously my grandfather, since he's passed, you see kind of shadows of him everywhere in the house. And
I would say even more so now than ever, just because his grandma is, not that she isn't as influential in the house, but she has a harder time seeing, she has a harder time hearing. So, she doesn't necessarily leave her physical imprint in places. So he was a big labeler. So everything has his handwriting all over it. And he just had all of his very quirky ways of attaching this thing to that thing to make it work for him. So, you find yourself using this contraption that he had put together and then really looking at it and going, well, do I need to do it that way anymore? I mean, he may have done it because of a shoulder issue or just because he thought it was more efficient that way or whatever reason he had. It was just, now you kind of sit there and you go to do the thing the way Papa did it, and you're like, oh, I mean, do we have to do it that way? Or or should I just keep doing it that way because that is the way that Papa did it, and you don't want to change anything. So we kind of find ourselves in a weird place because it's not just a matter of, helping grandma along and helping her recover and then moving on with our lives. We find ourselves now at a place where we, are likely moving in with her and kind of helping her near the end of her life and making sure that she's okay, because she can't be in that home alone. So,
well, and also she can't see very well, and she's hard of hearing, and there are other things with her where she has limitations. But then there's also the fact that, as I mentioned previously, they've been in that house since 1964. So if you can't see very well, but where everything is, because that's just that house has been so much a part of you for so long. Like, the last thing I want to do is start going in there and be like, you know what, I don't like the way the kitchen looks, I'm remodeling that, and this carpet's gotta go, and this and that. And
no, she keeps telling me, I might ask her where something is, or I might ask her, okay, well, why do you do it this way, or whatever. Or she explains how they literally filled, the napkin holder, and I let her explain it, and it's fine, and if that's how they want their napkins, it's fine. But she then wants to punctuate it by saying, but you can do it however you want to. You can move whatever you want, or you can change whatever you want. And how, for the life of me, am I going to change something that she's literally been doing for the majority of half a century? I can't change those things.
And that's kind of how selfless, the exact opposite of what I just said, selfless she is. She's like, you know what? I know I've been doing it this way. I know I'm comfortable with this way, but I want you guys to be comfortable because I realize this is hard for you guys. And, even in her case, their anniversary is coming up. It'll be July 2nd. It'll be their 70th anniversary. So it's like, she lost a very large part of herself. I mean, the way that I'm, obviously you can tell by the recording, I'm devastated, but she's devastated, and she's still trying to think of others, and it's very amazing, just speaking volumes about my grandmother, just like, here she is, physically not able to do a lot of stuff, not able to whatever, and she's just kind of rolling with the punches as best she can.
She really is. I mean, it's hard for everyone all around. Just, you find yourself repeating yourself. You might find yourself having to stop and listen a little bit longer, and
or screaming, not in anger, but because she's kind of hard of hearing.
Yelling, because that's just how you have to talk. And, your initial response is to be utterly frustrated and just exasperated, I guess might be the word. But at the same time, like Joe said, you have to think, me personally in her situation would probably just be a puddle on the couch, leave me alone forever. Why are you even trying to feed me? And she has gotten up every morning. She makes it a point to get herself dressed. She, even if she has to, and I mean literally verbally walk herself through something, I'm going to go get dressed now. I'm going to go brush my teeth. She's walking, she's her best hype man right now, because she is continuing to just do her day-to-day things and trying to hold on to that routine so hard just to just to get through the day, because and again, on top of that, still being so sweet and letting us, I say quote unquote, letting us do whatever we want to do around the house, but I'll be damned if we're gonna change anything on her.
Well, and like Digna kind of said about, previously, it's like we're at this point, she can't live in that house by herself. And we kind of talked about, no one knows what's going on, because that we really messed that one up. But my grandfather was driving. He did all the cooking. He did all the shopping. All those things, and he just seemed more. I'm not saying he was amazingly robust, but he just seemed more
self-sufficient.
Yeah, he was just like, wow, he's going and doing. Look at him, 89 years old, going about and doing this stuff. Like, good job, bud. That kind of stuff. And so we just wrongly, obviously at this point, assume, and also he had longevity on his side of the family. He had a grandfather that lived close to 100. His mom lived to be 93. His older sister lived to be 94. So it's like, wow, he's got longevity on his side. My grandmother, on the other hand, her brother died in his 40s, and sister died in her 60s. Her mom lived to be in her 80s, but so it's like, wow, there's not as much longevity in the family.
So if you were to bet on,
if I were a betting man, I would say Grandma was going to go first, and I think Papa kind of thought that too. And he was like, I don't need this house anymore. As far as like, because there's a lawn to mow and upkeep.
Not that he mows the lawn, but just
right,
things to do.
Yeah, exactly. But there's just all sorts of stuff, and we live in a townhouse. He's like, if Grandma goes before me, we could swap houses. Like, I'll stay in your townhouse, which is 2 bed, 2 bath, 793 square feet, like very easy to take care of. No big steps, no anything. Versus their house, which is 3 bed, 2 bath. It's got a garage. It's got a very large lot, and then they used to have a back porch a long time ago. But then they turned that porch into what they call the den. But there's a step down, I don't know, about close to 6-inch step down.
That's a big step.
And that step down, every time Grandma goes in and out of it, my heart skips a beat. Like, uh-oh, is she going to fall? Like, that kind of stuff. So it's like, it's enough of a big deal that I'm like, wow, this house is not necessarily made for them. So
it is, we'll call it the opposite of, or not the opposite of baby proof, but age-wise, the opposite of baby proof. It is not.
It's not
elderly proofed.
Right. And, and they've done things to it to kind of help out. But the main thing, I was like, wow, yeah, that'd be cool if he got in this house with a 1-story, no step downs, no step ups, like that'd be good.
Square footage to cover.
But Grandma, on the other hand, since she doesn't take care of herself, it was like, well, Papa even said, he was like, if I die first, almost like in the unlikely event of me dying first, he was like, she's got insurance to go into a nursing home. And I was like, as soon as it happened, I was like, I can't do that. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm like, if I put her in a home, I'd be like murdering her practically. She would go there, she'd be depressed, she wouldn't have control over this and that, and it would just be, and I think that that right there would just quickly put her to the great beyond. That'd be it for her. So I can't do that in clear conscience. So now we're facing the inevitable that we're going to have to move in with Grandma. Right now, it's like, all right, I'm going to spend the night, or I'll spend a couple nights. Digna will spend a night, and
my kind of in limbo.
My cousin Becky spends night, which is not a way to run a family. So we need a more permanent situation. So the permanent situation at this point appears to be moving in with Grandma, but at the same time, trying to change as little as we can get away with, or as much as we can get away with without changing Grandma's.
Her.
Yeah. So,
yes.
So like, that's the thing. So like the front bedroom that used to be my room when I moved into their house, she really doesn't do much of anything in that room. So we can kind of go in there and, move things around and kind of make it more hospitable for Desmond.
Which, let's be honest, Desmond's not going to sleep there. So we can probably just put a couple desks in there and
So he's going
Call
to
it a
sleep in our
spare
bed?
room. You know he's going to. You know he's not going to sleep all the way across the house.
Well, you know what? I will say
it's a big room.
my grandparents...
We could put a crib in there for him.
Well, no, yeah, kind of.
I know.
So when I was a kid, when I was little, I would sleep when I slept at my grand's. I guess I was much like Desmond. I'd end up sideways and kicking this one and punching that one while I'm asleep. And so they didn't sleep with the crap when I spent the night. And so they actually bought a cot, like one of the green cots like they have in like elementary school kind of thing. And they had a cot, and they put that cot next to the bed, and I slept on the cot.
Well, that's where Desmond might end up, because I've already thought about this multiple times, and I've thought about the logistics of, we've got to bring his bed, and this is how I'll put it in this room, or even if we get him a new bed, this is how I'll put it in the room. And then my mom brain got to thinking, what's the point even? Because he's not going to sleep all the way across the house.
Your room's perfect. Thanks for ignoring it and sleeping in my bed.
Essentially he'll be a baby again, and I don't blame him. He's lived in less than 800 square feet for a majority of his life. And even in those less than 800 square feet, he still begs to sleep in our bed.
Or a day.
If we let him sleep in our bed every day, he would, which we don't.
Yeah.
But he's not going to sleep in the complete opposite corner of the house in a room by himself,
which is
in a house that he's not familiar with, and it's just not going to happen. And I can't even slightly blame him, and I would honestly prefer to have him on a cot next to me anyway.
Which is funny, because the way he's going to feel inevitably kind of a little bit maybe frightened or weird, I guess. I don't know better about that house. It was always the exact opposite for me. Like, to me, it was like, I'm at the grandparents' house. This is like the spot. Like, I feel like this spot is like the best place I could possibly be, and, and like I said, I would sleep in their room and all that stuff. But as I got older, then I would sleep in like the front room that ended up becoming my room when I moved in permanently.
I know he'll eventually feel that way, I'm sure, in the house. And I think it's honestly just the feeling of like, in this house, it's tiny, and you kind of feel like you're cocooned in this house. Like when the doors close and it's bedtime, it's a small house. There's not a lot of breathing room, good, bad, or otherwise. And it's just kind of like you're being left to float about this huge space in their house, even though it's not a huge house. But it's twice the size of this house. So it feels mahoosive.
It definitely
and it kind of just feels like it doesn't feel like there's no safe place. It just feels like, like I said, you're kind of like floating about. It's just there's
too much place.
You need to be snuggled back in your blankie.
But it's kind of I obviously am not the first person ever to experience loss. I mean, I did experience loss about 6 months ago, so that's kind of still kind of fresh, we're still kind of dealing with all of that. Now my grandfather's passed. My grandfather was somebody who liked to collect things. Like, if he had one good thing, well, then he might as well have two of them. And he should probably buy a whole pack just in case someone he loves wants one. Exactly. And that's just the way he was, nothing against him, but like he enjoyed those the moisture wicking kind of synthetic material shirts. Mm-hmm. And he used to go to the gym a lot, so they kind of, they're really good for going to the gym and
in Florida.
Yeah, and Florida, exactly. Yeah, all of that stuff. So he had a lot of those shirts. Some of them, I'm not sure he wore every one of them, but he, for a while, he was a little bit larger, so he had some double XL shirts, and then he had some XL shirts, then he went to large, and then eventually, towards the end of his life, he was a medium. So he had a lot of shirts, and he hung them all, which was weird, enough, because they're not like fancy.
They're not going to wrinkle either.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're literally the one shirt that you could just like wad in a pile, kind of pop it once and then just put it on, And but yeah, so he had them, And I mean, so the sheer number of hangers alone, not even talking
They're
about
very
the shares.
thick hangers too.
Yeah, all these
They're
thick
extra thick
plastic hangers. I don't know all about them, but there were a lot of thick plastic hangers. And he even had a lot of those, like the ones that come from like J.C.
Walmart.
Penney or whatever. Yeah, like those, he had a lot of those that would say the size. But so, I mean, I took all these hangers up to Goodwill. And as far as those shirts, I think I have like 30 of them now. Like
You have 30, and we probably gave away about 50.
Yeah, well, and so and as far as the extra large, so that's the size that I have.
Maybe not 50.
So I kept like 30 of them, and I gave away at least a dozen of them. The extra large.
Yeah.
And then the mediums, well, I mean, the mediums and large means nothing to me, so I just all of those. But it was a full, and I say a full garbage bag because if you just like. I could stuff like 20 shirts in a garbage bag and it might fill it if you just like stuff. But if you have them nice and folded and all this kind of stuff, like you can fit a lot of shirts. And I had a full to like couldn't even close the bag of just medium and large moisture wicking shirts. I mean, he had a lot of them. I mean, he's a collector of things he liked, of things he wanted. He had multiples. There was never just a
things
handful.
He may have forgotten where he put, so he might have gotten another dozen of them.
Because you never know when you might need a dozen more shirts. So he was that way with the shirts and the socks. I mean, he had more socks in his various areas because they weren't even in just one drawer, many drawers. He had more socks there than I think I've probably had in my entire life from childhood to now.
For sure.
And they all seemed practically brand new too. They weren't like old and worn out. So
which is funny because more than once
the holy socks.
He had socks with holes in them specifically because they were I forgot the name of the brand, but it was like a gold toe,
yeah,
some brand sock that he loved it. He found it one time, absolutely loved them, probably had like 20 pairs of those, but then couldn't find them again, or they didn't make them anymore or something. So
then he bought a dozen of this one, a dozen of that one.
More socks in search of the perfect sock with the gold toe, or
the gold standard.
Golden standard, exactly. So his gold toe socks always had holes in them.
Yeah, because he would wear those until the very end. But yeah, just like Papa's like peculiarities, that's just kind of what made him who he is. I got a brand new one of these. I've never used it, and it's been there for 40 years. Like a brand new 40 years old. Had a lot of plastic on it or whatever, and it's just like the plastic deteriorated, so it's just never used, but it's trash.
Unusable.
Yeah, like that's sometimes what happens. But and I'm telling you, like, as far as people on this entire planet, like he's like the tippy top. My grandparents are just they've both been there for me, when times weren't great, and that's what makes this one exceptionally hard for me. And eventually we all are able to move on, but it's still very fresh. And feels like maybe I'll never be able to move on, but I know it's not true. It's just one of those things that you have to heal. You have to cry. I'll definitely do a lot of that. I mean, like literally anything I do. It's like the day after it happened, I was looking in the refrigerator at the house, and there was spaghetti that he had made, and I was like, "This is the last spaghetti he ever made." Like your brain like will mess with you during times of grief. You're like, this is the last one of these he ever, whatever. Like, but these were his, so it's somehow better. He had, Digna mentioned something about shoes at one point. I took over a dozen pairs of very similar shoes to Goodwill. And they were kind of old man shoes. No offense against old men, but even if they were my size, I might not be inclined to wear them. But they were not my size, and I didn't really find anybody the right size, so I ended up taking them there. But I, like, literally, when I left Goodwill, after dropping these things off, I felt guilty because they were his things. But I know logically it doesn't make sense to feel guilt, to put some sort of
attachment
to a pair of shoes. And some of those shoes he never even wore. They were still in the box. You know, it's like I'm putting this attachment to this object that is not, it's not sentimental in any way. You know, it's not like it was his wedding band or something like, you know.
Something you always, saw him wearing all the time.
Yeah, it was something I saw that he owned, apparently, because but never saw him. But yeah, so it's, no one can tell you really the best way to grieve. I mean, they talk about the stages of grief, but I mean, denial is a big one, especially when you're in their house. You're like, oh yeah, he's just going to walk out of the bathroom any minute now because he's just not in this room because he got up and went to the bathroom, obviously, you know.
It's the only other option.
Exactly. Like, he's either in his chair or on the commode. I mean, that's just...
So the other chair?
Or he's on the chair or he's on the throne.
He's on a chair.
He goes from chair to throne, and that's pretty much the lifestyle. But I do appreciate on social media, you know, I did make the announcement because we didn't do an episode the previous week. And I do appreciate the outpouring of, you know, well wishes. And I've gotten cards from friends and family. And just, we definitely appreciate it. You know, in a time like this, it's nice to know that people care. And I don't even mean just because my grandfather has passed away. Just times like these, you know, the way the world is, the way everything's going. It's nice to know that people care.
It's nice to actually connect with people.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't know if my grandfather's passing is going to help, you know, any other tough situations in other people's life, give them some perspective. I mean, if that helps with that, well, then it makes it a little bit less sad that he's gone. At least something good can come of this. And once again, it wasn't a tragic death. He wasn't, you know, on a deathbed for months with some sort of tubes coming out of, you know, he lived his life. He had a very full life. He was probably one of my best buddies.
You know, he lived his life with his best friend for almost 70 years, and that's something, you know, if we can all make it to that, or half of that, or half of that, then, you know, we can only hope to live and have that kind of love in his life, love in our lives. Because, you know, they had their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and they got to raise all of them in that home and together, and, you know, as best they could with as much love as they could. And, you know, good, bad, or otherwise, you know, all of our faults and all of our positive aspects, they definitely did their best and loved hard and loved bigly. and they got a lot of opportunities to show that to their family. And for the ones who have been fortunate enough to be a part of their lives and to get their love, you know, to get to experience their level of love, you know, we're the fortunate ones.
Can't argue with that. I can't do much of anything right now. So, well, thanks guys for listening. I appreciate all of your support, and I guess don't be gross and wash your hands, and
or don't, just live your life,
or
go hug your family.
I would say, yeah, love harder than you've ever loved before, because you never know. You never know. All right. Bye guys. Bye.